Voting is something we take for granted, without much thought of how difficult it was for women to win the vote and how it took 72 years. Now there's talk of making it harder for people to vote today. Why? Because voting represents power, the power of people just like you and me. I'm writing a book about my grandmother Edna Kearns and how she spent 10 years of her life working to win votes for women. When I was young, my mother told me about this important, nonviolent social revolution. I wanted to raise my hand in class and tell everyone about Edna. At school, we learned about the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, how all men were created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and nothing about votes for women and how it came about. I had to wait until 8th grade when my social studies teacher summed up our past in one sentence. He said, "And then in 1920, women were given the vote." I knew no one gave women the vote. They worked hard for it, starting back in 1848 with a convention in Seneca Falls, New York, where women insisted that the Declaration of Independence hadn't gone far enough. But it turned out that winning votes for women was much more difficult than anyone could have ever imagined. By 1900, voting for women was still 20 years off in the future. Women realized that pretty pleas and petitions and conferences weren't enough. They would have to take bold action. Young girls also wanted to be free, go to school, vote, hold jobs, participate in the democratic process. But this was far off in the future. It took tens of thousands of women like my grandmother to win the vote from 1848 to 1920. They marched in parades. They organized nationally, state by state, and in their own communities. They put themselves on the line, and they also went to jail. In 1913, my grandmother hitched a horse to this wagon and traveled from town to town so she could be seen and heard. This wagon was used as a speaker's platform and in Votes for Women parades and demonstrations. The wagon was called the Spirit of 1776, and Grandmother Edna told crowds that taxation without representation was tyranny. Campaigning was hard work. Not everyone supported women voting. You can tell by the way Charlie Chaplin made fun of those who wanted the vote in this 1914 film, The Militant Suffragette. Women were considered pushy for wanting to vote. Terrible things were predicted of women voting. Many people were certain everything would change, and not for the better. The most difficult part of my writing has been searching for answers about why the exciting story of the Votes for Women movement was laid aside, forgotten, buried. There are lots of opinions and guesswork about why this happened. After 1920, when all American women voted, there wasn't even a big pillow fight over the new distribution of power, and people really expected that. The movement had been about nonviolence and noble ideals. The activists carried torches representing truth, liberty, and justice. They expected to hand the torch over to the next generation. and for women to be a force in political life. Votes for Women pageants had celebrated liberty and democracy. However, these visions were overwhelmed and buried by big tobacco companies that poured money into advertising. They called cigarettes torches of freedom, and if women only smoked cigarettes, they would be free. Women went for it. They smoked, and they smoked, and they smoked.
For the taste that you like, light up a Lucky Strike.
Right now.
Light up a Lucky. It's light up time.
It's my opinion that smoking wiped out memories of the 72-year suffrage movement. The Miss America pageant started in 1921 and substituted bathing suit contests and pretty gowns for political activism. And the long and difficult work of our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and great-great-grandmothers was just forgotten. Now there was no doubt I had to write about our exciting Votes for Women history of action, vision, and determination. But where would I begin? I started by daydreaming.
I delivered the message. Now what?
Now let's check the second message.
For security reasons, mum's the word.